The sun hung high above our suburban street, casting long shadows from the neatly trimmed hedges that lined each identical yard. The air was thick with the scent of freshly mowed grass, and the distant hum of a lawnmower was a constant companion. It was all so pristine, as if every blade of grass and every flower petal had agreed to be part of a larger performance, a play choreographed by none other than Karen, our self-appointed director and president of the Homeowners Association. Karen's presence was a force. She prowled the neighborhood with the air of an empress surveying her kingdom. Her eyes missed nothing, scanning for any deviation from the dictates of her beloved HOA guidelines. She wielded the rulebook like a sword, ready to cut down any who dared to challenge her reign. It was an odd sort of power, but power nonetheless, and one she used liberally. She started small, as these things often do. A note tucked under my windshield wiper, its paper crisp and creased with meticulous care. It demanded that I repaint my mailbox. Apparently, the current hue wasn't to the HOA's liking. I chuckled, shaking my head at the absurdity of it all. It was just a mailbox. Ignoring her was easy. At first, another note, this time slid under the garage door. My lawn, it seemed, was infringing upon the sacred symmetry of the neighborhood's aesthetic balance. I could almost hear her voice in the neat, looping script. It was an itch I refused to scratch, even as the notes grew more frequent, more insistent, a symphony of passive aggression. My life, in contrast, was one of quiet contentment. I enjoyed the solitude, the gentle rhythm of my days, punctuated by the distant calls of birds and the rustle of leaves. In my garage, a sanctuary of tools and half-finished projects, I found peace. The world outside fell away, leaving only the satisfying weight of a wrench in my hand and the comforting hum of the radio. Karen, however, was persistent. Her quest for conformity was relentless, a tsunami of compliance ready to crash over my quiet corner of the world. Yet, each note was met with a serene smile, a casual nod, an old oak against which her waves could break but never move. The irony, of course, was that my house adhered to the HOA rules more closely than most, a fact that Karen seemed to conveniently overlook. I kept my lawns trimmed and my hedges neat, but there was something about my refusal to dance to her tune, to react to her provocations, that must have irked her. Her notes were like paper bullets, harmless yet incessant. And then, one day, I found the notes had stopped. Not a word, nor a whisper from Karen. The silence was deafening, a calm before the storm. My instincts, honed over years of reading the subtle signs of nature, told me something was brewing. Inside my garage, the motion alarms lay in wait, invisible sentinels ready to announce any trespasser. They were a recent addition, a precautionary measure more than a necessity. I had no illusions about Karen's boundaries. She was a woman who saw fences as challenges rather than deterrents. It was late one night, with the moon casting a silver glow over the sleeping street, that the alarms tripped. Their shrill cry shattered the night's stillness, a chorus of indignation and alert. I rose, a calm certainty settling over me like an old, familiar coat. As I made my way toward the garage, I knew there was a strange comfort in that certainty. Karen had crossed a line, and the script she had been writing had taken an unexpected turn. The protagonist of her narrative was about to meet a plot twist she hadn't anticipated. I smiled, not out of malice, but out of a deep, abiding sense of irony. In trying to enforce her order, Karen had unwittingly invited chaos, and as I opened the garage door, I was ready to let her face it. In the days following Karen's unexpected intrusion into my garage, an event lit up by the sudden glare of motion alarms and the cacophonous wail of sirens, I noticed subtle shifts in the neighborhood's atmosphere. A quiet storm brewed beneath the surface of our manicured lawns and trimmed hedges, whispering through the Swiss lace curtains of every meticulously identical window. Karen, undeterred by her embarrassing escapade, transformed into a whirlwind of bureaucratic fury. She wielded the authority of the Homeowners Association like a scepter, her power growing as she conjured new, absurd regulations with the flourish of a magician pulling rabbits from an empty hat. The latest decree declared that driveways must be devoid of any aesthetic clutter, a term she defined with elastic vagueness, capable of ensnaring anything from a child's bicycle to a garden gnome. I watched from my study window as she patrolled the neighborhood, her clipboard clutched like a shield, doling out citations with the precision of a seasoned sniper. Each infraction was a new mark on her tally sheet, a quiet triumph etched into her neatly ordered universe. The neighbors, wary of the storm she might unleash, scurried to comply, their faces masks of forced geniality as they adjusted potted plants and rearranged patio chairs within her stipulated bounds. A whisper of rebellion tickled my conscience. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes, savoring instead a silent sense of satisfaction that my own castle, brimming with its secret defenses, remained unbreached, a fortress against her encroaching tyranny. Yet, Karen's machinations extended beyond the superficial. Rumors, like insidious tendrils, began to weave through our once tranquil streets. They slithered under doors and seeped through walls, carrying tales of my supposed transgressions, each exaggeration more ludicrous than the last, painting me as a renegade defying the sacred covenants of our community. A strange camaraderie emerged among the gossiping horde, united by their shared titillation at my imagined downfall. I listened, bemused, as conversations twisted into absurdity, how I supposedly hosted wild, clandestine gatherings under the cover of night, or harbored exotic pets that prowled the neighborhood under a cloak of invisibility. Irony flavored the air like a rare spice, a reminder that reality had become a theatrical farce directed by Karen's fevered hand. Her desperation to control, to impose order on a world she feared might slip through her grasp, ignited a fire that consumed reason. She had become both protagonist and antagonist in a self-scripted drama, blind to the folly of her own creation. The absurdity was not lost on me. It hung like a pensive mist, blurring the edges of her carefully drawn lines. My own silence, a quiet defiance, grew louder with each passing day. Words were unnecessary. My actions or lack thereof spoke in volumes Karen's citations could never capture. In this surreal ballet of authority and resistance, I found myself wondering what lay beneath Karen's rigid facade. Was it fear? A need for validation? Or was she simply a victim of her own script, trapped in a role she could not abandon? Answers eluded me, slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. The truth, like Karen herself, remained inscrutable, a mystery wrapped in layers of suburban etiquette. But beneath it all, beneath the noise and the drama, I stood unyielding, a silent sentinel in a world gone slightly mad, waiting for the time when Karen's reign would wane, and the neighborhood would remember the simple joys buried beneath her convoluted edicts. Or, for now, I watched and waited, secure in the knowledge that my quiet resistance was a story yet to be fully told. As the shrill buzz of the motion alarms faded into the silence of the night, I took a deep breath, allowing the tension to ebb away. The night had greeted us with a crisp chill, enveloping the neighborhood in a quietude that seemed almost sacred, until Karen decided to disrupt the peace with her unsolicited inspection. Breaking into my garage, her audacity knew no bounds. I watched from the shadowed corner of my living room as the small red dot of the security camera blinked, recording her every move. She was unaware. Of course, Karen had always been oblivious to the subtleties of technology, much like she was to the concept of boundaries. Her flashlight danced over the neat rows of boxes, each labeled meticulously, an organized chaos she couldn't begin to understand. My journal lay open on the coffee table, its pages filled with notes and observations, a quiet testament to the months spent dealing with her intrusions, and unsolicited commentary on how our community should look. Documenting each encounter had become a ritual, my means of maintaining sanity amidst her chaos. Tonight, her hubris was illuminated by the harsh LED beam she waved around like a scepter. She paused, squinting at a dusty box labeled Christmas lights. Her fingers twitched, tempted to pry, but she hesitated. Perhaps even Karen knew. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. Or maybe she sensed the invisible audience watching her every move. The irony wasn't lost on me, Karen. The self-appointed steward of neighborhood propriety, caught in the act of trespassing, her hypocrisy, a bitter flavor on my tongue. I took a silent sip of tea, savoring the moment. Patience, I reminded myself. This was the final scene in a long play. Karen had unwittingly set the stage for her own unmasking. The footage, her own hubris captured in digital form, would be more eloquent than any confrontation. The HOA, with its stiff-backed board members and unyielding bylaws, would have no choice but to see the truth when I presented the evidence. The night deepened, and with it, a sense of calm certainty settled over me. Dawn would bring clarity and perhaps a hint of justice. I imagined the look on Karen's face when the board would be forced to acknowledge her misdeeds, a bitter pill for her to swallow, but one of her own making. The motion sensors in the garage blinked again, and the alarms briefly stirred, prompting Karen to retreat hastily. Her flashlight bobbed as she made her way out. Her form swallowed by the night. She was gone, leaving behind an echo of her presence, a whisper in the darkness. I closed the journal, feeling the weight of the past months lift slightly. Tomorrow, the light of scrutiny would shine upon Karen. Her reign as HOA despot would falter, not with a bang, but with the soft click of a mouse, the undeniable truth laid bare in high definition. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, I sat quietly, my tea cold, but my resolve warm and steady. It was, after all, a new day, a chance for the neighborhood to reclaim its peace from the tyranny of one who had overstayed her welcome. In the quiet aftermath, I realized, perhaps, that justice wasn't about vengeance but about balance, restoring what had been disrupted. Karen would learn, as we all must, that boundaries, once crossed, often lead to unexpected revelations, and sometimes the greatest revenge is simply letting the truth speak for itself. The morning after Karen's nocturnal escapade into my garage, the world seemed almost too still, as if everything around me had decided to pause and lean in closer, eager for the next act. A faint mist clung to the ground, softening the edges of the world. It was the kind of morning where the air tasted of potential, of things about to shift. As I sipped my coffee, I wondered at the quiet irony that permeated my small cul-de-sac. Here, in the heart of suburbia, where conformity reigned and the hum of lawnmowers was our shared symphony, Karen had underestimated both the silence and the shadows. Her transgression was etched in the footage from the motion-activated cameras I had so meticulously hidden among the rafters and the shadows of my garage. Alone, her movements were both comically exaggerated and stealthily precise. Like a cat convinced it was invisible while stalking a bird, she had rifled through toolboxes, nudged at storage bins, her flashlight beams slicing through the dark in search of whatever sins she imagined hidden beneath my roof. I had watched the video only once, enough to note the details and store the images in the quiet recesses of my memory, enough to feel the steady churn of indignation turn to resolve. The footage was now a silent sentinel, archived and waiting. The legal process was a calm lake, deceptively serene, but with depths best not underestimated. I found a lawyer who seemed at ease with the quirks of HOA dynamics, his office lined with books that whispered of cases past, each spine a silent testament to battles fought and won. Together, we prepared our case with the kind of precision usually reserved for watchmakers or surgeons, each piece carefully aligned to fit seamlessly into the larger narrative. Trespassing, invasion of privacy, misuse of her HOA powers, each charge a brick in the wall we were building. My heart thrummed with quiet satisfaction as I signed the papers, each stroke of the pen a small but necessary betrayal of the unspoken neighborhood code to let sleeping dogs, or rather, prying Karens, lie. She wanted to play the game. I would make sure she understood the rules in full. The HOA meeting, scheduled for the following week, loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon. There, amid the faux wood paneling and the scent of freshly brewed coffee, I would unveil the footage. The audacity of Karen's actions would unfold before the board, each frame a testament to her hubris. I could almost see it now, the flicker of recognition in her eyes, the flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. As I waited for that day to arrive, life continued in its peculiar dance, a rhythm of routine punctuated by the surreal knowledge of what lay ahead. I found myself watching Karen from a distance as she went about her daily rituals, her steps no longer quite so assured, her gaze darting nervously, as if sensing the tide beginning to turn. In the days leading up to the meeting, the air around me buzzed with the anticipation of a storm not yet broken. The neighborhood watched, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling just beneath the surface of our neatly trimmed hedges and perfectly aligned mailboxes. The stage was set, and Karen, in her oblivious way, had unwittingly provided the perfect climax to her own drama. The night air was cool, a balm after the sweltering day, a brief respite before the clockwork of dawn, the rhythmic hum of insects, a symphony only silence could afford. I exhaled deeply, letting the weight of the past weeks dissolve into the shadows. The motion alarms had done their part, a vigilant sentry against the encroaching chaos that Karen embodied. The garage door stood ajar like a half-told secret. The keypad's red glow was a muted beacon. Justice, quiet and unseen, lurked inside, tethered to the silent sentinels I had installed. Karen, in her relentless quest for control, had overstepped. Her sense of entitlement had clouded her judgment, turning curiosity into invasion, like a moth drawn to the wrong flame. She had crossed the threshold earlier, the alarms pricking the silence like a needle. Her footsteps were the heartbeats of a misguided mission, her breath a whisper lost in the shadowed corners. As she rifled through my life, the camera watched, capturing her descent into folly frame by frame. The community had grown weary of her reign. Her iron grip on trivialities had loosened as neighbors began to see beyond her facade. Her insistence on conformity, like a badly set clock, grated against the rhythm of genuine community. The footage, a digital testament of her trespass, was my trump card. It wasn't about retribution. It was a mirror, reflecting truth back at a woman who had long since stopped recognizing her reflection. I had allies now, their patience worn thin by her antics. Her downfall was a collective sigh of relief waiting to be exhaled. Under the streetlight's watchful gaze, I gathered the neighborhood. Faces emerged from shadows, drawn by the promise of change. Words were few, but understanding was plentiful. Karen's reckoning was not a spectacle, but a quiet resolve, a shared understanding that her tyranny had reached its nadir. The board meeting was set for the following evening, a gathering of the exasperated, the hopeful, the determined. Karen would stand alone, her allies dwindling like night before the dawn. She had no idea the extent of her betrayal, how her invasion had united what her divisiveness had fractured. I watched the footage again, each frame a testament to her overreach, a reminder that power unchecked leads to ruin. Her expression was one of certainty, as if the world owed her its secrets. I wondered if she understood now, as her image flickered in the dim light. The gravity of her choices. Dawn crept over the horizon, its light a gentle nudge toward resolution. I welcomed it, the promise of closure, of restoration. As the neighborhood stirred to life, I felt the whispered promise of a new beginning. Karen had her chance to rule. Now, it was time for her to listen. The meeting room was a crucible, simmering with anticipation. Karen stood, defiance etched on her face. But beneath the veneer, uncertainty quivered. The evidence spoke its silent truth. The community, once splintered by her machinations, stood united, Her attempts to disrupt were over. The piece she had shattered was now being meticulously rebuilt. I stood, the footage cued and ready. The room was hushed. Holding its collective breath, she turned to face me, her expression a battleground of denial and realization. It was time. I pressed play.